Hi, I'm Bob Rosendahl.
And I'm Rick Rosendahl.
Welcome to the Router Workshop. For those of you that have routers, you'll find that if you can mount it in a table, you'll be much better off. I feel about 90% of what you can do with your router is best done in a table. If you get that table set up properly, it'll be handy. You'll use your router more because of its ease of operation. Rick, what can we do here?
First, we'd like to show you the table system we use.
And here it is. Our table here is made out of plywood. It's not made out of a particle board. What we've got in here is we've got a plastic laminate on the top. We've got an oak trim, and that's a stressed plywood in it. The rest of the table here is made out of Baltic birch, and Baltic birch is kind of neat plywood. If you ever cut it, there's never any voids in it. It's all solid inside. We've even got a bit tray, and one of the most important things you do with your router bits is store them in a real good spot so they don't hit one another. You've even got room for 2 trays in it. The table is very versatile for that. You can store your wrenches in the bottom. You've got the other side there for your cords and things. And Rick, we even need a router to fit in here. Have you got one handy?
Yes, right here. Fits right into the slot here. You never need to lock it down or mount it. When it comes to changing router bits, all we need to do is flip up the tool on the side here, change the bits quick and easy. When you're done, drop it back down into the hole so it makes it a quick, simple cuts.
And you know what? It's really neat because our snowbirds can take this apart, it's collapsible, and put it in their trunk, take it with them on their holidays. It's a neat way. What else can we do today?
Well, we're going to go ahead and do sliding dovetails today with our router. Before we join Bob in the workshop, let's take a look at what's on today's show. Dovetails the simple way, the dovetail bit, dovetail joint setup, router safety, and stop and start molding. Now, let's join Bob in the workshop.
Today, we're going to show you a little different kind of project. When you build things, it's always the joinery that it is, and you're choosing some type of joinery. Well, most of us don't have the access to a lot of jigs and fixtures, and just in case you don't have, let's talk a little bit about some lineal dovetails. For whatever reason, everybody figures you have to be some kind of an expert to cut dovetails, so let's have a look at it. But first, let's get rid of our jewelry things again and keep things safe. So in this little box, we'll store my watch. I don't happen to have any rings on, and I don't have any sleeves. Make sure you don't get anything hanging down it that you can get caught in a router bit and start going around together with it, so we'll keep things clean. Well, anyway, when we got this in here, here's the type of thing we're going to make. This is what we call a bookstand kind of thing, and it's got dovetails in it. One piece slides off here. Any pressure in here locks this down, holds them together. Now, what it is, consists of, is that we've got a lineal dovetail. This lineal dovetail, and I'm going to turn that stick around here a little bit, maybe you can see the dovetail bit. What we've done is pass a dovetail bit through this piece. We've also done the same in the bottom in here. We've passed a dovetail bit through this piece. We've got a dovetail slot in it. Now, the next thing we've done is make a dovetail pin fit that slot. So that dovetail pin comes down and slides inside of this piece in it. So it'll come in here and slide. If I turn it around here, you'll probably see it a little easier, and I'll bring it right out to the end here, and you see the dovetail pin on the end of this. So we got the dovetail pin inside of it. Well, that's done on a router table with a router and a router bit without any special kind of fixtures. Now, when you put the pieces together, we've got a little round corner. We're going to show you those also. And before I get started, I'd like to take another close look up here if we could. We've got the roundover bit has come in, and we'll talk about it a little later. Comes down, takes the edge off. Remember, we didn't run across here because that'll tear it out. So now we'll just set maybe these pieces aside here. And what we'll do is get this router out of the box. Isn't it neat to lift it up here? And I see I got a bit already in here, but it's not the one I want, so we're going to change it. And the bit, that's kind of neat. You see how I fastened that in and the wrench didn't fit? I like the 2-wrench system, but in this case in here, you get the wrong hand in the wrong place. Set it together. When we take a router bit out of a plunge type router anyway, and it's easier just to squeeze the 2 wrenches together. Just let it sit there. And the router bit. Let's talk about the router bit a little. This router bit that we've got in here is a 1/2-inch dovetail. And the 1/2-inch dovetail, where it gets its size, is that it's a 1/2 inch across here. So that is the width of the cut of the dovetail is a 1/2 inch. You'll notice that it's sloped down. And the slope down on either side there is a 14 degree. And there's all kinds of router bits on the market, and a lot of people go to buy them and want to check those out. That's a 14 degree. Don't get a 9 or anything under it, because the shorter the angle is on in here, the less holding power you have. A 14 is kind of a standard. So we'll slip that router bit in. And again, go right to the bottom, pull that router bit out a little bit in it. Don't let it sit at the bottom. We'll tighten it up. Once we get that tightened into place, and you can pull those wrenches apart as tight as you like in them, we'll set it up. Now I'm going to turn this around inside of here. all our base plates are pre-drilled to fit a router, and we have a large hole in it to accommodate different sized bits. But when we've got a small cutter in it, we've got to do something to fill that up in it. So again, what we're going to do is put a brass bushing in. That little insert inside of it's got a smaller hole in it. It's got a ring nut on the back side. So when we flip that around here, and you can maybe have a peek at it, I'm going to put that piece in. In fact, I'll leave it right here and let you have another quick look at it. We'll pull it apart in here. I need to put the ring nut on the back side. So we'll reach back inside of it and tighten it. Nice thing about this brass is we don't have to worry about brass coming loose like steel will do. You can finger tighten it, it'll stay. Brass has a holding power. Now when we put it up in here, you see how it reduced the size of the hole. No springs in it. Drop it in for easy adjustment, bring it up. Now here's what we're going to do. We're going to pick up some material here, and what we're going to do, take my tape off of these pieces. We've got a little bookstand pre-cut here. What we need to do is put the dovetail work in it. So we'll get rid of this tape. Here's our base piece. Here's our two little slide pieces in it we're going to use, and those are the end brackets. What we're going to do with those pieces is this. We're going to put a dovetail pin on the end and on the side of each of these pieces, and in the center of this one we're going to put a dovetail groove, and on the center of this one we're going to put a dovetail groove, and in the center of the base we're going to put a dovetail groove. Now remember, we don't have any fixture to do this with, so it's just a kind of a guess type thing with it, but it works very easily. So the first thing we're going to do, we need a fence in here because we're going to run this through with some means, so we need to get a fence. Well, our fence is made out of polyethylene in here, and we've got a flat side. We've taken the guard off so you can see a little better, and if you'd like to, you can put the guard on the back side. The reason we're rolling it over is that when we go by a fence that has a half hole in it, like that, when it goes by, with the rotation of the bit being there, it wants to tuck it inside. So we'll use a flat-sided edge. We need 2 clamps. So we'll get a couple of clamps in here, and we'll put the clamps on the end. Clamp goes up in here in that fashion, and it's kind of nice that it doesn't really matter where you put that fence. It's always straight. And we'll talk about that a little bit in it. Height of the bit. Let's set the height of the bit first. That's always a controversial thing, and people like little fine adjustments. Remember, anytime you're cutting dados, rabbets, whatever that happens to be, or dovetails, never exceed half the center of the board. That is, don't go any deeper. If you're in any doubt, it's better to be shallow than too deep. So we'll just set the block up here so we can see it a little bit. We'll drop that cutter in so it's about halfway. Should be good. Now, finding center. My dad always had a theory about finding center of things. He said there was only one center, so all you should do is just take your pencil, look at the piece, drop the center piece in it. Well, that gets to be a little controversial in it. Well, how did you really know? Well, I really didn't know. But what I did is I put a guess mark on it, and here's what you should do. Take that mark that I put in it and put it right over the center of the bit. Most router bits will have a center point in it, as this one does. In case you have a bit that doesn't, just lower your cutter down below the surface of the table, turn the router on, and it'll give you a center automatically. So we'll set that mark right over the center of that bit, and now what we're going to do is put the second clamp on here. Once we get this clamp in place, tighten it down in it. Here's what we're going to do. We've had this side against it, and we got the pin in it. To check to see if you're right or not, just reverse the stick and put it on this side. If there's any variation in that, just take your fine adjusting tool. You can't get along on your router table without it, and just tap in or out in here. Don't loosen the clamp because you lose your location. Well, I got pretty close to that one this time. Now we need to cut this. Let's talk a little bit about dovetails. That dovetail bit being closed in on an angle like that, what it does is close it in so the debris doesn't cut out very good in it. It has a hard time cleaning. Never feed too fast so that it won't clean out ahead. You've got to be able to let the debris come out. And above all, remember, the fence is always on the right-hand side of the bit, and the bit turns towards you, and you feed into the rotation. Never come from the back side. When you do that, the pressure is 90 degrees away from the fence. It wants to pull it out. You've got no cut in here, so all the debris got no place to go, jams up, could take it away. So we can run this piece in here. Well, we're all ready to go in here, but we should use a push stick. We've got a very unique push stick. Push stick we've cut a dovetail pin on a handle. It happens to be a polyethylene handle. We've got a dovetail slot in the stick in itself. When you put that in there, don't glue it in with any manner because you might have to change the block when it gets wore out. And let me lay that down. We'll turn it over. This little block in here is dovetailed in and it's glued in. This one is loose, so you can use it as a flat top push stick, or you can use it with a little piece on the edge. And what that piece will do in here is give you that little bit of operation so that it's kind of in a little shoe in here and holds you up against the fence and down. If there's anything you do on a router table, it's not the kickback or the hold over to the fence so much as it is holding it down. Sometimes it has a tendency to ride up. With a dovetail bit, because of its shape, it won't do that. Well, anytime we did anything, we didn't have it plugged in, so we're going to plug this in now. And we got it plugged in. Let's see if we got some power. Now that cut pretty nice. We got a gentleman comes to my seminar all the time, and he's got to sit right up in the front, and I kind of adjust my table so I can get some on his boots so he knows where he's been. But he keeps coming back. Isn't that neat how that shot out there? See, we got a nice clean cut. Now what we need to do is these other two. We'll set that one aside. We've got to put it down in this one now. I got to find center again. So I'm going to guess at it again in here. We're going to talk about finding center several times throughout a series here. Now this time what makes it so nice is all you have to do is move one end over. Move the one end over, set it in here. Set it up, and again we'll reverse it over here, we'll check it. If it's not quite right, just tap it out. You've got your fine adjusting tool in here, tap it out. I don't know how many times during shows and seminars people always come up to my table and say, Bob, how come you put your fence like that? I remember two gentlemen came to the show, and they got into a real argument as to where that fence should be, and one gentleman came up and he said, Bob, why is your fence so crooked? So I got down and had a look, and I said, well, it looks straight, because I thought he was teasing me, and he said, no, he said, it's not parallel with the side. Well, Bob likes to show his rule once in a while, and I got the neatest ruler you ever seen in here, and it's a rubber rule. So I checked the side of it, and I pulled it out, and I checked the other side, and I said, it looks parallel to me. Well, he took off through the crowd, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings, but an hour later he's back, and he said, you don't sell them rules, do you? My dad would really love it because he always said it takes 30 years to see how to do something, then you can't see it anyway. And he said now, you can stretch your rule out with all them big numbers. They get bigger as you stretch it so you can see it better. People, it's kind of fun, but don't get too serious with your measuring. We're always measuring things too much anyway. Okay, doesn't matter where it is. We're ready to go. We didn't change the height of the bit. Let's run these two pieces now. Lock it in. There's the two grooves. That's the easy part. The tough part is to getting the pin on the end of this stick and the side to fit into these pieces. Rule number one, don't change the height of the bit. So we'll flip this down in here, we'll flip it aside, pop it in there, and all we're going to do now is expose a small portion of that router bit. We're going to expose it on the outside edge. Remember what we're going to start in here, you can move it out and cut deeper, but you can't add it on. So just expose a small portion of that bit in here, tighten it down. You may like to check that, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to run this in, and then what we're going to do is turn the stick around. So you can use this little stick as a backer here to keep you kind of straight with it. So let's get plugged in. We're ready to go here. Let's just have a look. Reverse the stick. There's the dovetail pin. Now, what we want to know, does it fit? So we'll slide it in here and see. That's too tight. I want a sliding dovetail, so it's a little snug in it. So all we're going to do is just tap that out. As we tap it out, it exposes more bit. We can come and do the next one. Now let's run it. Now we got it. Now, let's just have another look here and see if this piece fits. The bad thing about it is that if you've got a variation in the thickness of these two pieces, you may have to adjust each one. That's because you're obligating yourself to the thickness. When you put one piece in, turn it around, come back the other, then you got to be on. People, what we ended up here with, we got dovetails and sliding. Before I slide that together and show you what I've got in here, we've got a lot of square corners on it. And what we like to do with those square corners is probably round them off. But we'll have to change cutters. And with that, let's just take this off, and we'll lay this down And we'll tip this back up, and let me lay the fence out of the way, and we'll tip the router up. Remember, before you do anything, you change the bit for it. You're going to have to unplug. I got to tell you a little story here because we got a good friend of mine that came into the show, and he's holding his grandson, 4-year-old grandson. I lifted my router up to change the bit, and the little fellow said to me, he said, "Don't forget to unplug your router." Well, I wasn't sure after hearing so many routers whether I heard good or not. So I went about and I changed it, and the next time he said it again, and so I stopped. And I said, "Bob, what's with this? That little guy telling me to unplug my router." And he said, "Well, I babysit him 3 days of each week." And he said he just loves your videotapes. So he was picking up the safety parts, and he was going to make sure I did it too. One of the things that we have here this time is that we've got a round over bit. I dropped my collet on there. And when I said collet, it's a 1/2-inch shank bit router in it, and there's provide a collet for it. That is, you can use 1/4-inch shank bits, put them down inside of here, and it shims it out. The collet is split, so when the squeezing comes on it. That is a 1/4 round over, and I'm checking the pilot on it because this time we're obligated to follow the pilot. We'll put this together. We'll tighten it into place. We'll lock it down. Now, this time bit won't go through the brass insert, so we take the brass insert ring, put it back in, put it in your pocket. Here's the problem again. See, we got the bit now. Now, we've got a bit coming up here. We got room. It's got a pilot on it. We'll drop that into place. One of the things that happen with routers, of course, they're turning in some direction, and we're feeding the workpiece into the rotation of the bit. I've got that unplugged, and I'm hand turning that to show you the rotation of the bit. When you feed it in, it wants to take it away. So what we need is a safety pin. It's a brass pin, and the brass pin goes in a hole just between you and the cutter. Now we can put it up against here and cut it in. Here's what happens. When we come along here, we have to be careful with this because we got a dovetail slot in it. This dovetail slot, when it comes up here, and I'm going to remove the pin for a second, we could come in here, that bit could come in, the little pilot liable to go in that hole. And if we didn't do it, it would come across and split it. So what we're going to do, we're going to come off the pin up to a start, come down and quit, and then reverse it. And you just watch and see. What we're going to do is we're going to do some start and stops here with all the pieces. So we'll start off here. We'll lay these up where we can get at them. And the first one I'm going to start are the 2 bracket pieces to hold it. And we'll tip it in here. And I don't want to start right on the dovetail, so I'm going to start against the pin and just ease it in here. But what about the height of the bit? Well, the height of the bit with a round over is easy to get because all you need to do is set your workpiece over on that curvature. That curvature is like that. And when we set it up in here, we'll bring it up and pick up as much of the curvature as we can. So we'll lock it in. Don't take too much so you have a line in it. Just take enough there to skim that edge off. So again, just raise it up till it comes there, lock it in, and you've got it. Let's plug the router in. We're ready to go here. You'll notice what I did here. I started, I came around, and I stopped. But every time I did this, I started on the end grain. That's important. Always do the end grain first, come with the grain across the end. On the same on these. I'm going to slide one piece in here just to show you here what happened. We'll slide this together and see how it comes up here. If you can get a real good look, you'll see that I've got this little round over and they come kind of mitered in the corner. If we'd have gone straight through, you'd have had a hole in it. Well, let's show you what I've got in here. We'll take this pin out. I've lowered the router bit in it. This piece slides in like that. This piece comes down on top. This one slides in from this direction, and the next one slides down. And we got a little bookstand. Now that bookstand is slightly different than the one I showed you because we got some curvatures in it, but it doesn't matter its shape. What it really matters is that we've utilized a dovetail bit, a sliding dovetail bit with a lineal dovetail in it to provide some product here. Now you can put books in it, you can put videotapes in it, whatever you like, but you got the option of setting it. If you like to make your bookshelves that way and put bookends in, it would be great inside of it. Kind of a neat little project. We have many people out there. Sell them at craft shows, whoever wants to do it. Make them out of any kind of wood in any size.
Let's review what we learned on today's show. Select a 14-degree dovetail bit. The height of your bit should be 1/2 the thickness of the board. The fence should be mounted on your right-hand side to ensure the proper direction of feed. You need to provide an even feed speed to allow the dust to clear the cut. And be sure to use a safety pin when doing stop and start molding. You've seen Dad use a fulcrum point as he was making some router cuts. Let's talk a little closer about the fulcrum point. Here's the safety pin that we're using, and when we look at the safety pin, we want to make sure that the safety pin is the distance between the bit and the bearing is no more than 1 inch. That allows us so when we're routing this piece that we have mechanical advantage over the part. If you also look at the part, try and make sure that it doesn't get under the 4-inch mark or 4 times the size or the distance away from the bearing. When we look at it, this bit here is a roundover bit, so that's a fairly simple one to start with. I've also brought one more thing into this, and that's the guard that could be made very simply. If you look at it, the height of the piece matches the thickness of the material that we're routing. The only thing we've done is gone ahead and put a couple of washers down between the acrylic piece. And all we're going to do is take it and flip it around here and clamp it off onto the one side. Let me get a adjustable clamp here, run it over top of the bit that we're going to be cutting, and clamp it down. Now once we've got it clamped, there's no way that we can get down underneath that piece while we're making the molded edges. The next thing, when you're looking at your piece, you should start always so that you're going into the edge grain. If you notice this shape here, we've got the end grain in a couple of places, and what we want to make sure is we start in the easiest grain, which is the edge grain, or end grain. Now, when you set it up, always keep it unplugged before you get ready to do it. Once you're ready, you make sure the machine is in an off position. We'll plug it in the router now, and let's go ahead and cut the piece. I'm going to turn the speed up. I have a safety concern I'd like to bring to your attention. These arbor and pilot bits, and this particular one I have in here is a solid pilot, but this is an older type bit. The arbor and pilot type bits are ones that can be assembled. This is the arbor, and I'll take off the pilot here. The thing that's bad about them is that they can be both mounted from the back or the front, and what that does is that makes the cutters go the wrong direction. And I'll bring here one that I've just purchased, and they have different styles here, but here's the arbor, and there's the pilot. Now they're live center pilots, are like bearings, so they make it a little easier. But the thing about them is that you can mount them the correct way, which is this way, or they can be mounted the wrong way, which allows the cutter to be going in the wrong direction where somebody could get hurt. The other thing that's bad about the tool is that it only requires, and they've got a whole pile of little pieces that you have to use to put it together. The other thing that's bad about it is that we use a nut to solely hold it in place to keep it tight. It does not have anything to key it or tie it together, so it can spin freely on the arbor, damaging both the inside and the outside. My suggestion to you is, for the amount of money that these arbor and pilot bits do cost, it's not that much more to buy the solid type of bits that are already set up and just buy the individual bits. Dad and I have been excited about the router for the past 30 years, and the last 15 years we've been promoting the router in North America. Throughout this series, I hope you enjoy what we have to offer. But one thing you should be mainly concerned about is your safety. The first thing about safety is anytime you have to use your router, make sure you unplug for setups and bit changes. Number 2, always use quality eye protection, whether it's prescription or off the shelf. Never use damaged router bits. Always use the proper tool for every setup. And finally, if in doubt, use common sense.
That was a fun project. We've even got wooden books in here to put a hold of it. I'll roll it around. You can have a look on the other side. It even looks like pages. A little tough kind of a book to read, but it worked.
Absolutely. Once you learn this technique, you can use it wherever you need an adjustable joint.
Routing can be fun. Get your router out of the box and into a table. Have fun. Build a lot of projects with it. I'm Bob Rosendahl.
I'm Rick Rosendahl. Join us next time for Router Workshop.